Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we have
H.Y. Hanna.
Yes, it was such a great interview. I mean, she's very self-spoken, but she's so smart. Just super, super smart about what she's done. And she made some mistakes or things that she wished she'd done differently, but they got her to the place she is now. So it's always great.
She
she
shares
from those things, and she shares that.
Yeah, she shares the different things she's learned from. We talk about some covers that she learned some lessons about, and we're going to include those in the show notes. And talking about like dealing with your internal editor as you're writing. And also it's interesting, she talked about expectations that her family had regarding writing or not writing and how she dealt with that. And so I think it's a really good interview, and I think it'll be really helpful. We cover a lot in the interview.
We do.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you this week?
Well, I'm visiting my family this week, so I'm not doing much. I am watching a new show. It's a new translation, it's in French this time. It's a French detective show. And it's called, I think, The Art of Crime. And it's all about like art theft crime unit, or not theft, but like crime, a unit in France that investigates crime somehow related to around art and famous paintings and stuff. And it's very interesting. That's kind of what my On the Run series kind of revolves around, some of that kind of stuff. So it's right up my alley. And it's got the quirky art history consultant and the the cop that she's dealing with has no knowledge of art at all. And he's like, I don't need to know about art to catch thieves. And so there's a really good relationship dynamic there where they're,
that creates conflict right there.
Yes. Yeah. So it's good. So I've been watching that, and definitely not G-rated. So if you're, don't get into it if you're looking for something from Hallmark, but it's very good.
Not sensitive, but just, I get it.
Yeah. So what about you?
Well, I have just been working on my edits, and I am pretty much done. I leave today. This is Friday the 16th to go. I'll be gone for 2 weeks, and I'm going 3 different places. So I really wanted to be done. I have a couple of little things that I need to work out, but other than that, the book will go to the editor next week sometime. It was due on the 26th, but I'll be out of the country actually, even on the 25th. So I'll send it a few days early. But I also wanted to tell people, and I have not read this book yet, but it came highly, highly recommended to me. And actually, the person gifted it to me yesterday, so I appreciate it. She's one of our listeners, and I really appreciate it, Amy. But it's called My Story Can Beat Up Your Story, and it's about plotting, and but in kind of a different way. And she swears by it, so I'm looking very forward to reading it. And there's some sample templates in the book, so that you can download. So that's very cool. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
I love that title.
Yeah, I know, me too. And it's funny because it's got a little kid. He looks like like a little bully kid. Or not the bully kid, but like he's not going to take any crap from you. On the cover, it's really cute. So. Anyway, that's about it. That's going on here. Not much.
Yeah. Well, I did learn a new plotting technique that I'd never heard of. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know exactly how it worked. Spaghetti bowl plotting. Have you heard of this?
No.
So you just take a big sheet of paper.
Confusing.
That's why I was like, I don't know if I want to learn about this, but it's actually very simple. It's basically a mind map. You take a big sheet of paper, you write down all your characters' names, over in a big circle, and then you figure out how everybody's connected. So you draw lines between the connections of the people.
Oh, yeah,
and
cool.
I was trying it today, or on the plane flight that I took up here. I tried it. I was like, I'll just rough out kind of my idea for my book and see what I can do. And it's interesting because it helps you figure out the connections between the people. And that's something I have to do, like my mysteries, I have to figure out who and why all these people could be suspects. So very interesting. So I kind of was doing a version of it. I just didn't know what it was called. Didn't know I was doing spaghetti bowl plotting. So. So that was fun. So we need a question of the week. So what should we talk about this week?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's talk about the family thing. I think that's like, do you self-edit because your family members are going to read your books? How about that?
I think that's great. Yes. And I actually chose my genre because I knew people I knew would be reading my book. So I was like, I can read mysteries, I can write mysteries, and I can hand these off to friends and family, without being worried about what they would think of me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get on with this show because H.Y. Hanna, it was great.
Very good. Yeah, here we go. So today we have H.Y. Hanna with us, and the initials of her first name are H.Y., but her real name is Hsin-Yi. So hi, Hsin-Yi, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
We are great. We're so happy to have you here.
So let me read your bio and we'll jump into the questions. Hsin-Yi is an award-winning mystery writer and the author of the best-selling Oxford Tea Room Mysteries. After graduating from Oxford University, Hsin-Yi tried her hand at a variety of jobs before returning to her first love, writing.
Very good. So tell us how you got into writing.
Okay. I was actually thinking about this, and I know, like everybody usually says, I've always wanted to be a writer, and I, like a lot of them I did, but actually I spent most of my early life trying not to be a writer. So
really
trying to avoid it or trying to run away from it. And I think mainly because I don't know if you know, but in Asian cultures, there are only really 4 acceptable careers. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or a dentist, or a teacher at a push. It's you're sort of you grow up with those expectations that you mustn't got to have a proper job and definitely nothing creative. I mean, being a sort of, there's a word in it in Chinese like entertainer. It's said with a disdain. And it's like a dancer, artist, anything in that sort of field, because it's a very, it's just true. It's a very unpredictable career. And Chinese people are generally very practical, and which is, the right thing, that you should pick something that's going to give you a steady income and reliable, etc. So I think, I grew up very much with that fixed in my head, that you mustn't even consider anything remotely creative. And so I think, I spent a long time denying it. And even though actually I was writing all the time, I was writing, I wrote a diary every single day from the age of 6 all the way into university. So every single day religiously I wrote in a diary, like pages and pages, not just, and I wrote, letters to people. Like, I feel sorry for the poor people who got letters from me. Like dozens of A4 pages of, in great descriptive detail of things I'm sure they didn't want to know. But it was just all kind of come out. And if I wasn't writing that, I was writing shopping lists. I was always writing something. And that was something that, like in school, I couldn't wait to get the English, we call it English composition, like the assignment to write things. Everyone else hated it and I couldn't wait to get it. A lot of, I think it's like you're trying to deny that part of yourself. Yes, but anyway, I sort of ignored it, went off to university, did a science degree, did all the things that were expected of me, and came out. And at the time, that was very big. The sort of management consultancy was the sort of graduate career thing. And so, I thought, okay, I'll be a management consultant because everyone, that's the done thing. Then I realized I couldn't really count very well. And that basically first interview. And the man said something like, can you estimate how much orange juice is drunk in the US every day? And I blanked. And he was trying to help, he said to me, what's the population of the US? And, how many people like to drink? And I was just, so anyway, but I figured out management consultancy was not really my forte. And I ended up doing basically, a variety of different jobs. I ended up in an advertising agency, doing sort of account planning, account management. I did various marketing jobs. I basically for the next 10 years, I did a series of different jobs. I then went and got further qualification to teach English as a second language. I did some modeling. I did some dog training. I did some like a sales rep job for educational publish. I just did a huge variety of different things, and I think I kept trying to. I felt very much sort of like I was, that thing about fitting a square peg into a round hole. You really were trying to be something that you weren't, but you were trying so hard. Yes. And also because it felt very much like a little bit like a dirty secret, like at least in the sort of the background that I was from in terms of what was acceptable. You never wanted to quite admit it, that you had this dream of this hankering, because it seemed so scandalous in a way, or not even scandalous, almost like laughable, that people would just
they wouldn't take you seriously.
That you're even considering it. And so every time it came up, I just sort of pushed it away and ignored it. I did have a brief period where, when we were still in the UK, this is just after I started working, and I can't remember how I got it, but I got involved in a local writers group, and I got very friendly with several authors who were lovely. And this was around the time when chick lit was very in vogue, Bridget Jones and all of that. And I love Bridget Jones. And I thought to myself, maybe, I could, just not seriously, but just try, but it was like a dirty secret, that you sort of did even to yourself, you didn't really want to admit that you were trying to write a book, and then finally, and then we actually, I got married, and we decided to emigrate, and we moved down under. And when we first came out here, I didn't have a job, so in a way, it was almost like a forced break, and my husband is amazing. He's incredibly supportive, and he basically said, why don't you just, write a novel, try it, and so anyway, I gave myself a few months. I thought, right, I'm just, I'm going to do it. I'll write a chick lit and and I'm very impatient. So I wrote, at the time, the advice was you should finish a book and then look for an agent. This is the whole trad route. I wrote 3 chapters basically and decided, right, I'm not going to waste time while I'm writing the book, because I knew the whole process was a lot of rejection. I'd done all the research, and I knew that. So I sent off these 3 chapters with the letters, query letters to agents, and I actually got accepted by an agent very quickly. And she came back and she said to me, "Where's the rest of the book?" And I went, "Actually, I only have 3 chapters."
That happened to me too.
And, so anyway, but she was lovely. My agent was lovely. And so she submitted, and I actually got very close to a book deal at the time. It was with Hodder and Stoughton, who are now owned by Hachette, I think. And it was all getting very, like I went back to the UK, and they were taking me out to lunch, and they all sounded great. And then the editor actually left, and the new editor, and I think, I don't know what, these things happen or what, but the new editor came in, and they're not as keen because it's not their pet project, and all that sort of thing. So anyway, they dropped the idea, and I very quickly, which I'm ashamed to think about it now, I very quickly sort of thought, right, that's it. That just shows the whole thing is a waste of time. I'm a failure. I knew it. It was almost like I was trying to prove to myself that I was stupid to even consider this laughable career, because I'd always been told from a child that you don't do this kind of thing. See what happens when you try. And so I just gave up. And when I think back now, I feel quite, ashamed of myself, because, they always talk about being a writer, you should be persistent. But I at the time, I mean, I have writer friends from then who, persisted for the next 10 years. And I just stopped writing altogether. And I went on to do all these various other jobs. But I think over the course of the next 10 years, it was like there was a yearning, like you were very always like unhappy, a part of you, and you kept trying to convince yourself that you were fine and you were happy and this is what you were meant to be doing. And anyway, eventually I was approaching my big 4-0, and I thought, you start doing all those things where you start thinking and you think, oh God, what am I doing with my life?
Exactly.
All those questions, and then it all came back to me, and actually at the time I fell into writing a little bit, where I had a Great Dane at the time, and she had a very popular blog, and I ended up being contacted by Dog Magazine and asked whether I would do an article about what it's like to live with a Great Dane. And so I wrote this as a personal piece, And then they actually paid me, which I was quite shocked because I hadn't expected it, and it was a decent amount of money. This was in pounds. So by the time you converted into, New Zealand dollars at the time, we'd gone to New Zealand first. And it was a real revelation for me. I just suddenly thought, oh, you can actually earn money with writing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like a door or window open suddenly. And I suddenly thought, maybe this could be, a career as opposed to. Well, anyway, I sort of, and my husband was really supportive. So I sort of threw myself into the whole, researching the whole thing. And I started approaching magazines and, sending proposals in for article ideas. And I got picked up quite quickly and got regular sort of commissions from a set number of publications. So I sort of quite quickly built up a steady kind of freelance writing, I guess, I don't know, career's too big a word for it, but yeah, I was doing it basically as my full-time job. And I did various other things on the side, but like modeling and stuff, I was continuing that. So it was quite, but then I did that for about, I think 3 or 4, 5 years. And then I think even though I was doing that and I thought, okay, I've done it, like my goal was always to earn a living from writing. Mm-hmm. But actually, then I realized my goal was really to earn a living
writing books.
From fiction. Yeah.
It was like you sort of went halfway there and then you sort of admitted the full thing to yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I sort of thought, okay, fine. And then I thought back on my experience with the trad publisher, and I thought I really don't want to go through all that again, and the submission and whatever. And that was around the time when there were a lot of articles about KDP and indie publishing, and oh god, I can't remember her name now, Amanda somebody or other, who they were very successful. Yes,
Amanda Hawking, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All these successes, and so it made me sort of think, and it really appealed to me, the idea that you didn't have to basically wait for those gatekeepers and stuff. And I thought, okay, I'll try it. And I did it actually with a children's book at first, because of my dog blog at the time, my Great Dane's blog. I did the whole sort of children's mystery middle grade thing, which, as you can probably know, it's like the worst thing to do in indie.
It's very hard to sell indie books.
Children's fiction,
books, yeah.
But, you always sort of, I didn't think I would do the easier, but anyway, I did it. But it was a good learning, curve. And I very quickly worked out that if I wanted to actually make a living from my books, I had to write adult fiction and not children's, because you realize there was parents buying the books and things. Yeah. And so then I moved into adult fiction. This was in 2014, so I wasn't quite in the sort of the early gold rush, but I just come in at the end of it, and of course, the first thing I did stupidly was I wrote what I love, which is, people always say, write what you love. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand a single thing about market or what was, nothing like that. I just wrote, and I wrote this romantic suspense that was much more like, I love Mary Stuart. So it's that sort of older fashioned romantic suspense, a lot less steamy. And it's a different tone anyway.
Yeah, and it doesn't fit anywhere, because I did the same thing.
No, exactly. I'm sure you know, Sarah. So I wrote that as a trilogy, and it was a real struggle basically to market, because it was a cross-genre book. It wasn't sexy enough for the romantic suspense people, but it was too sexy for the mystery suspense people, and it just really didn't fit in anywhere. I also didn't think through things like it's set in Singapore, because I was familiar with Singapore, but in hindsight, I think maybe I should have set it in Paris or a more aspirational destination.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't think of any of those things. And but it came out. And then I thought, okay, everyone at the time was saying you've got to write romance if you really want to sell. Yeah. So I thought, okay, I'll write romance. So then I did a series of sweet romances, because I thought I wasn't very good at writing the steamy stuff. I'll do the sweet romance. And that sort of did okay, but again, I didn't do market research. Basically, I didn't really understand the whole writing to market thing, and I didn't understand the sweet romance. You really, at the time anyway, it was either Amish or like Western, the cowboy bride type thing, and so I didn't do any of that. I did this random beach romance set in Australia, centered around 4 vets at a veterinary animal hospital, and each vet would have their story. And so anyway, it did okay, but it didn't set the world on fire, and I got very, very discouraged. I just wanted to give the whole thing. I was ready to just give up on the whole indie thing. I just thought, right, I'm a failure. I can't sell. And for me, it was always like, because for me, I had this whole problem of it had to be like a viable career against what I should have done.
Right.
The actual part of the book's earning was quite important, like as in I kept measuring myself against, what I would have earned if I'd gone back to an office job, as a marketing manager or something. Anyway, then my husband just kept saying, you can't give up, you've just got to keep trying. And then I heard at the time, a lot of on the sort of author groups, they were talking about a thing called JAFF. I don't know if you've heard of JAFF. So JAFF, which stands for Jane Austen fan fiction. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very, very niche genre, but it's for people who just love, mainly Pride and Prejudice, but any of the Jane Austen books, and there are variations. So you take the same characters and the same sort of background, but you basically write your own. Well, it's fan fiction anyway, basically. And there's a rabid audience for it, and I didn't know anything about this, but I thought, at the time there were several authors who were very friendly and very helpful. They were like, try it. They were having great success in it, and I thought, what have I got to lose? And I'd never written historical fiction, but I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. And actually, I'm a massive Jane Austen fan anyway. Like I sort of watched, read the books 100 and watched the BBC version loads of times. Quote a lot of it verbatim. And my own voice is quite sort of formal when I write. So I think I don't know. I found that when I started doing it, I sort of took to it like a duck to water. It was all very easy in a way to drop into that sort of language. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I wasn't expecting from it. I wrote the first book, and I still vividly remember that day. I published the book and went out and said to my husband, I'm going off for a walk. And I went out for an hour, and the book had gone live. And I came back home, stepped in. My husband was waiting for me, and he looked at me and he said, "It's sold 40 copies in the first hour it's gone live."
Oh my gosh.
And it was $4.99, this book. It wasn't discounted.
Yeah. And this was in 20...
This was in 2015.
Okay. Yeah. And that was like when a lot of people were releasing at 99 cents, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, but in this niche, it was like, it was my first lesson of what it is to write to a hungry market, like what difference it makes to have a market for something. Because up to then, it was like a massive uphill battle of, you always believe that if you write good enough and and all the rest of it. And this, it was a shock. I couldn't believe it. And there was no promotion. I had no platform, nothing. It was literally, this book was published. And because there was a hungry market for these kinds of books, and they found it somehow. Yeah. And anyway, so that was, it really restored my mojo in terms of, I was really ready to just give up. And I thought, okay, I can do this. Yeah. So I just spent the rest of 2015 writing JAFF books. Right. And I wrote 6 books. And they're not very long. But, they all have to fit, certain expectations that readers in the genre want. And I mean, it was amazing. It was just like, with no marketing, no promotion, nothing. The books just sold like crazy at $4.99, and
yeah. So that
it was just staggering.
Would you consider that like your first big success? Was that what let you know you could keep going?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it was success in the sense that it wasn't what I really wanted to write, but it was the first time I if you measure success by the whole, people say you need to reach 6 figures or all that kind of stuff, then yes, I suppose, from a sales point of view, yes. And, the books sort of just took off. But I think by the end of 2015, I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do. I could see that I didn't want to write JAFF for the rest of my life. I mean, there were people who do, it's their thing, but it just wasn't mine. And I think up to then I'd been like, I'm a mystery reader really, and a crime reader. I love crime. And I, how you're scared to do the one thing that you love best,
right?
You don't have permission, or you're not good enough to do that. Mm-hmm. But when I was writing those sweet romances, I kept putting a dead body in every story, and I get to the end, and people are like, "But they don't get together," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you know who got murdered? Who was the murderer?" And they're just like, "That's not the point in a romance. You need to know whether they get together. It's not actually important whether you find out the murderer."
It's about the dead body, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, I sort of thought to myself, maybe I should be writing mysteries instead, because the dead body was obviously really important to me. So in 2006, at the end of 2015, I thought, right, okay, I done this and I felt like I could do it. So I decided to do this, move into mysteries. And I initially had this idea of doing a mystery series inspired by my own experience when I was at Oxford. But And I had this whole thing about it was, inspired sort of a bit like Inspector Morse, but with a female lead, and she would be a young, amateur detective. But this time, I actually learned my lesson. I did market research. Like I didn't just blunder into it like last time. And I looked around and I realized that actually, as an amateur sleuth, it's got to be cozy. And if it's cozy, it's got to have all the cozy tropes. And, and I looked at my idea and I thought that's not going to work. And so I tweaked it. I started writing already and I changed the premise. I said, okay, my original idea was that she would be a student in Oxford, in the world of Oxford. I thought it'd be quite interesting for readers to find out more about the world of the university, with all the odd quirks and that sort of thing. But then I realized, actually, it's not really cozy. So I thought, fine, I'll make her an ex-graduate who comes back to Oxford, and she's given up a high-flying career to basically open a tea room. And she's got to face all the sort of things I could relate to myself in terms of not doing the conventional accepted path. And, people sort of saying, what are you doing with your Oxford degree?
Oxford, yeah.
And she's got a mother who's a real posh, kind of quite a snobby mother. They come from a sort of, in the UK, the class system's quite alive and well. And so there is, all that sort of thing. And obviously she opens the tea room and things are going well. And then, there's an American tourist.
Body.
Yes, gets murdered with a scone, one of her scones. And lo and behold, guess what? The detective in charge of it is her old flame from college, who she basically rejected 8 years ago. He wanted to marry her, and he's from working class, and she's from a sort of middle upper class family, and her parents disapproved, her mother disapproved, and so there's a lot of backgrounds about her working through her own kind of learning to deal with her own issues about approval from her mother's approval and all that sort of thing. But anyway, that sort of and so I put that in, and I thought, right, I've got to have I have a group of what I call the old biddies. So there are 4 old ladies that are in the village that the tea room's in, who are nosy and etc. There's a cat. There's a lot of baking. There's all the little descriptions of quaint British village setting and baking. So basically, I ticked the cozy boxes. And I think from a successful, that series did very well out the gate. So I've never really looked back since.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because like you have learned how to take an idea and fit it into what the market wants, but it's still something you want to write, and it's still the themes that you want to explore. And I think a lot of people feel like, if I'm going to make this sell, I have to change everything about it and I won't enjoy it. But you're showing that you can tweak it just a little bit so that it fits the market, but you still like writing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would venture to say that's probably why it's successful, because you have put the things you love about writing and the tropes and expectations of the genre, you've married those together. And that's why it's done so well, I would think. Yeah. That's my philosophy anyway. Sticking to it.
I was lucky that they weren't. It was quite different, and there were not many British cozies at the time when it came out. There were cozies, but not very many in a British setting. So it became sort of my brand, really. That like, I didn't realize there were so many Anglophiles, especially in the US.
Yeah.
British afternoon tea thing.
Yes. Well,
that's awesome.
I think that is a great illustration of like learning about writing and craft. Is there any other thing that, you wish you had known about writing and craft when you got started?
I always feel like when you get these, sometimes you get other writers writing and asking you, and I always, it's a terrible thing to say. It's almost like sacrilege, but I feel like saying, like, don't care too much about things like grammar. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, you should, make sure. But what I mean is, sorry, that came out wrong. What I mean is,
I have horrible grammar, so I'm like, yeah, right, she's right.
No, what I mean, it should. What I mean is hire professional editor and proofreader, and do not skimp on that. But when it comes to writing, don't care about that, because I feel like, especially if you're someone like me who has a massive internal editor and critics sitting on your shoulder and constantly self-doubting yourself, and it's hard enough trying to get any words down on paper. It's a huge struggle. So if I'm constantly thinking, which I was in the beginning, no passive voice and I have a terrible problem with adverbs. Like, I love adverbs. I put Lee after everything. He went over.
Yeah.
He said, caustically, and she looked at him brightly, and he regarded her tenderly, and like, I love my adverbs. And I just find like the best thing to do, I think, is to write, because if you hire a professional editor who's going to clean up, I don't care about that anymore. I just write whatever. Because I just tell my editor, go through, delete every adverb in there. I will just accept all your changes. I'm not going to argue with anything, but I just want to be free to get my story out. And if my natural voice is to write like that, I just let myself be free to write like that.
That's very smart.
Whereas if you think too much about passive voice and don't do this and don't do that, it's so. I just think as writers we're so full of doubt anyway.
Yeah.
And if you've got an editor there, you don't have to worry. And the other thing I always think is, obviously you should make an effort. And this is why I say it's sacrilege, because you shouldn't really say this. But I feel like no matter how much you try, you're never going to be as good as a professional editor. Like, you'll always miss things. They always know the grammar better than you. So just let them get on with their job, and you do the thing that you're best at, which is focus on the storytelling and the characters, because that's really what readers come to your books for. They don't come for the perfectly placed comma. No. Obviously, you should have perfectly placed commas, but let someone else do it.
Right.
But I feel like it's a bit like, like say Tina Turner when she's going on stage, right? Her job is to be Tina Turner, because no one else can do that. She goes on stage, she sings and she dances. No one else can do that part. But she doesn't do her own hair, her own makeup, because basically her makeup artist is a much better person at doing it than she can ever be. So why does she's not going to worry about that. She just lets them do her job to make herself look beautiful. And she just focuses on going on stage and singing and dancing amazingly. So as a writer, that's what you should focus on.
Right. I read Jennifer Probst's book, Write Naked is the name of it. And so it's a writing book, and it's kind of a memoir and a writing book. But she says in there that she asked Susan Elizabeth Phillips, who was my writing idol, about writing and what she wished she had known. And Susan said, I wish I had given myself permission to suck more, and so, because writing that first draft or just writing in general, you can self-edit yourself to death, and you can self-edit your voice out. So when I'm writing my first draft, I have a sticky note that goes right next to my computer that says, you have permission to suck. And so then I can just get it out, and I don't have to worry about the other, when I start feeling that self-editor or feeling that insecurity that this is horrible, then I see the note and I go, oh, I have permission to suck. So then I can go on. So I think that's really important.
It's even more than the sort of permission to suck, because you always think, well,
that's true too. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's more this sort of, almost like wallowing in your own work. Works is what I mean. So I relish every adverb I put in, because I don't care. I sort of think I'm doing it as ridiculously, bad purple prose as I want, because at least it's in there, and then I can clean it up later, or my editor can clean it up. I don't care.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I will say it's very freeing to write the 1920s historical, because they really did talk with lots of adverbs. So my conversation in those books, people are always gassy, and it was wonderful. All these exaggerated things,
mockingly,
yes, that we would not say. But it was lots of fun. That first book, I was like, oh, I think this is ghastly, and I think this is, and I just threw them all in there. And I went back and deleted quite a few of them later. But I left quite a few in.
Yeah, exactly. So, what do you wish you'd known about marketing in the beginning?
I think with marketing, the biggest thing was probably this whole thing about, cream rises to the top. Is not true. It's a terrible thing to say, but, I've been brought up with the whole work ethic thing. And if you work really hard at something, and if it's good quality, it'll find its own, it'll rise to the top, it'll naturally do well. And it was a very hard, blunt lesson that from a marketing point of view, from a commercial point of view, that's not necessarily true. And that it's having the right market for the right, like having the appropriate product for the right market is the key to success.
Right.
Well, there is no such thing as a poor product, because there are a lot of poor products on the market, if you want to call it that. They're not there, but there are poorly targeted products, I think, but not necessarily poor products. Because it's so subjective what's good and what's bad. But what if there's a hungry market for something, and that fits what they want? The whole thing about if you've got a really crappy plastic fork, knife, but what and everyone else has got a spoon, but what you really need is a knife. You're still going to go for the plastic knife,
right.
It fits what you want more than all the wonderful sterling gold spoons out there. So yeah, I think so. That's what I've learned, that it's not really about, because you start the whole thing thinking it's all about how good you are as a writer and how good the quality of your books is, and not that I'm trying to write crap books, but you sort of, I think, understand a bit better now that your measure of success, as you call it, is probably dependent more on understanding the market and understanding meeting the needs of the market.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Me too.
People read to escape and for pleasure, and they want to get into a character's life and explore that world. And sometimes the quality of the writing is not that important to them, So, like, I think we should, like you're saying, we should try.
As negative quality, that's the thing. Like it's all like
it is subjective.
Part of it. But that's what I mean. Like in terms of marketing it, like you could market the best quality, right? How do you want to define quality? And if it's not fitting that market, you still won't get anywhere. So the marketing begins, I think, with the product itself, which is a really hard thing to tell people, because sometimes you're very attached to the product, and I've been there. You've written the wrong product, basically, or not wrong maybe, but a difficult product.
Yes, yeah.
And no amount of marketing is ever going to help that, really, unless a new market is created for that product, which wants that very unique thing. And sometimes you're lucky, and I think a lot of times, not taking away anything from people who are very successful, but you can be very lucky in a sense of that whatever it is you love to write, or whatever happens to be the thing a lot of people love as well. And then that's an easier sell, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas if it's a mismatch, it's a harder sell. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And all the marketing, advertising, and covers and whatever.
Yeah. It may not, you can refine only to a certain point. And there's a point where it's not going to be able
or it's
to
like, that whole thing about pushing the thing uphill and you just keeps rolling back down.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, we talk about this a lot on here, but knowing your genre expectations and knowing what the readers in that genre want. I mean, there are some readers, especially some KU readers, they just want the experience of that book. Like they want whatever experience that book gives them, and they don't sit back and worry about things. They just want they want to be immersed in that experience. And if you can do that, then you know that about your genre, then you can just write as fast as you want to write. And as not saying poorly, because I really believe people can write books, really good books, fast. I can't, but I believe other people can. I've read them. And so, but just knowing that about your genre, like I think some sci-fi readers, they just want that experience. They just want to be in those worlds, and they'll read it, pick up another one, read it, and pick up another one. Michelangelo calls those well readers. But you just have to know that though about your genre, where other genres want a little bit more something, whatever it is, world building, less adverbs. I mean, it doesn't matter. You just have to know. You just have to know what that is. Yeah.
But see, even the world building, sometimes, it doesn't even have such great world building. As long as you drop in all the ingredients that they wanted it. That you really fancy eating something spicy, or you really want something sweet, and actually what you want is that thing on your tongue, and it doesn't. Sometimes you're not that fussy about what it is.
Exactly.
Donut in the world, but at that moment you're craving something sweet, and that donut hits the spot. And
I agree.
The best, tortilla chips or the best steak, but at that moment, the crappy donut from the whatever, service station,
convenience store. Yeah, exactly.
Well, what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and did they turn out to be right or wrong? We talked about it a little bit, but do you have any
Assumptions. Well, one of the things I thought was that I really did think this, that if you, as you write more books, it would get easier, and it doesn't. Like, I get so frustrated with myself. Like, now when I'm writing and I'm thinking, I've done this 25, 30 times by now. It should be quicker and easier. I should just why am I getting stuck? Why is it so difficult? And then I'm always convinced every book I've written is this one is the worst ever. I've never been so stuck. I've never had such dread. My husband is there, my poor long-suffering husband, going, just trust in the process. You went through this last time, remember? You thought it was the worst book ever, but you found the solution in the end. After a week, it just magically appears by itself. And I'm like, no, this you don't understand. This is like, it's different, this one. And I really thought, I don't know why. It should be. Don't you think it should be like, but
yes, it should be, but it's not. No,
you would think it would be easier, and it doesn't.
They say it's a skill, right? They say writing is a craft. Like, so, like say you make a cake. I mean, by the time you make your 30th cake, it should be a lot easier to do.
Right, but I think
we're baking different cakes every time, right? I mean,
yes.
Every one of them has a different element or different. And for me, a lot of times I think, oh, well, I don't want to write, that thing, that trope, that situation. I want to do this new one that I've never done before. So it's like I'm continuing to add in elements that make it more difficult.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's true. I never like to repeat myself. So I'm always trying with every book. If I'll think, I did that one. I already did a sort of a locked room mystery. I don't really want this one to be similar. And
Yeah. Well, and I think, when you start, you don't know what you don't know. But as you go along, you learn more, and you're like, you expect more from yourself. I think that the expectations, for me anyway, the expectations I have of myself are higher now than they were when I wrote the first book, because I didn't know some things. And also because I write comedy, and I've said this a million times, that I wish I had not used all my good jokes in the first 2 books, because now I have to reach a lot higher to find those.
More work.
Yeah, it's a lot more work. So, I think as you go along, it should get easier, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. Sara and I have talked about this a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever made a mistake that you thought, that turned out to be a good thing? Like something you thought, oh, I've really screwed this up, but then it turned out to be okay.
It didn't turn out to be okay, but it led to it sort of led to something good, I suppose, which is, this was a few years back. It was a time when everybody was launching at 99. Sara, you mentioned earlier about 99 cents, and I'm very, I have very little courage of my own conviction as an author.
Yeah.
Finally, in other aspects of my life, I don't know why, but when it comes to writing and being an author, I have very little confidence. And so anyone says anything on a Facebook group, another author, if they sound remotely, and sometimes people can sound very confident and in the know.
Right.
They're not necessarily basing it on very much, I don't know, experience or
maybe
proper data. But I'm like completely taken in, and so I listened to it, and everyone's like, you must, if you launch at 99 cents, you'll sell like 10 times what you normally sell, and it'll make, you'll be in the top 100 on Amazon, and it'll make all the difference. And so this was the 4th book in my Oxford series at the time, and they've been doing very well, and they came out at full price, etc., which was $4.99 at the time. And I sort of thought, okay, I've got to do this thing everyone else is doing. I'm so bad at not joining in and doing sort of courageous marketing things. So I did it, and it was an absolute disaster. Like I didn't sell that much more, basically. I hardly sold much more than my normal, but I sold everything at 99 cents. So, you can imagine how little money I made.
Yes, you were watching money fly out the window. I did that. Yeah.
Awful. I felt sick. And what's more is when I email my list with this whole thing of like, I'm launching it for you, especially at 99 cents, because I was going to raise the price afterwards. But, for my your hardcore fans, it's supposed to be this great gift you give them. Nobody thanked me. Everybody just said, oh, I'm so happy for the book. Like, they were excited about the book, but I didn't receive a single email that said, thanks for the discount.
Yeah.
So I sort of thought, you know what? My readers actually don't really care. Or at least maybe the ones who cared didn't thank me. I don't know. But I got a lot of replies. People were very excited about the book, but not one single person commented on the discount. So I suddenly thought to myself, hang on a minute, maybe I don't have such price sensitive readers. Like, why am I following this strategy and this path when maybe that's, like, it was the first time I really realized that there are different readerships out there, I guess, and you don't have to, with indie, there's the whole race to the bottom, I think, very often. And there's always the whole thing of bargains and using price to be the big appeal factor.
Yes.
And that was the first time I sort of thought, hang on, maybe I don't need to do them. I never done it before. And so anyway, because of that, I went the other way. So for the next release, I released not only at full price, I put my prices up. So I put everything at $5.99. I thought, what the hell, whatever, And so I raised everything across the board to $5.99 and released the next one at $5. It was the best release I had. It was amazing. I mean, I sold, more books and at $5.99. So it was amazing. And since then, I've never looked back. I've raised all my prices across the board. And I did test it. That's my scientific kind of degree background, whatever it does. So I always test things. And I do it for, like, say, a month, and I check the sales and I, check it again. And there was no drop in sales, not noticeably anyway. So I sort of thought to myself, and the thing is, I should have known this. When I used to work in advertising, we used to, pricing is a form of branding. And we used to create products just purely by pricing. You have a company that comes to you and says, right, I sell washing powder, and like, we need a new product on the shelves. And you're just like, okay, price it higher and make the box black and gold and call it, premium. And suddenly you'll find a lot of people buy that, not because the stuff in it is actually that different, but just because there is a mentality. There's a customer base out there who believe that more expensive must be better. And so it sort of made me think that actually there are niches, and you don't have to. You can position yourself at the premium end, and that is a conscious choice, and it's a branding thing as well. That and also I kept to myself, what, Apple's still in business, and Tiffany's still in business, and all these companies have not made a career out of race to the bottom,
right?
So unless there are people out there who are willing to pay, I guess.
Well, I think that's great though, but that's a hard lesson, but it's a great lesson to learn because, to price your books higher, you do find a different audience at every different price point. Yeah. And
I was going to say, it does. I feel like, I don't deal so much with the people. I never get anyone asking me about things going on sale. I don't get freeloaders asking for free books so much. That sort of, it's a slightly different audience, and they're used to releasing at full price. And
but now you know that. So you've tested it, and now you know that, and then you can go on and you don't have to wonder. So, that's a good thing. So, but we always like to follow that question up with, what about the opposite? Have you ever had what you thought was just like this super brilliant, amazing idea, and then it turned out to be not so great?
Okay, this is the one I sent the cover. So it's sort of two-part, but partly the cover, partly the actual. So this is again a few years ago when the whole witch cozy thing was the paranormal cozy, but specifically witch cozy were very big. And again, I was in all these author groups, and everybody's saying this is the thing you should be doing if you're in cozy mystery, and you should be writing a witch cozy. And I thought, okay, yes, I can do that. And there were two things I did really wrong. One was that aside from understanding market, I think you need to understand whether you can write to that market. Like you have to understand yourself, which I didn't. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I didn't really understand that, the witch cozies have a particular tone. It's like a very distinct kind of snarky, sassy kind of tone. And it's a very light, kind of fun, playful kind of thing. And I went in with my take, which was much more kind of, I guess my interest, it's darker, it's got much more legends and mythology, and it's based on old English kind of, legends, and this Shakespeare, and it's, there's a lot of world building and there's a heroine's got like the hero's journey. It was so totally not witch cozy, but I thought there was witches in it, and there was a vampire, and there was family, which is, I understood these were the sort of elements, but I didn't realize that I couldn't really replicate the tone. There was a tonal difference, what I was writing was much more fantasy in a way. I think more like Harry Potter type thing, with a big backstory and sort of. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I thought, anyway, I understood packaging by then. So I packaged them all up, and I had this, what I thought was a brilliant, cool idea, because my premise was based on, they were witches that had magical powers over chocolate. So it was the whole idea of the cacao, it was the whole idea of the food of the gods, and people did believe that chocolate did have some kind of magic power. And
I still believe that.
Movie the movie Chocolat? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So that idea there, and it's because I knew I wanted to write. I love writing about food. It was going to be sort of witchcraft and chocolate and the whole thing. And so I thought, how cool! I'm going to make each cover look like a chocolate bar. With the top with a little bite taken out of it, and it would be like a half unwrapped chocolate bar, and the chocolate bar wrapping would be the actual cover of the book. With the title, and I did all the, there was a witch silhouettes were basically what was the genre convention. So I did all that, and I put out these covers, and everyone loved them. I mean, they thought they were really cute and really original idea, because no one else had tried something like this before, and great. But the problem was that they were indicating something that actually the books were not. They looked like cute. Because they were cute and cartoonish and did play to that genre, and then people would buy them, and then I think there was a massive mismatch between what the covers looked like and what they actually got.
Story,
yeah. And in the meantime, the people who did enjoy that kind of story, the kind of story I was telling, were turned off because of these covers, I think, because they weren't picking them up, And so I grappled with this because, you thought it was the coolest idea ever. And everyone kept telling me they were a cool idea. Like, I had authors emailing me out of the blue and saying they loved the idea of the cover and, etc. Anyway, I sort of bit the bullet. And after maybe it was just under a year or something, I thought, I thought I've got to try something else. I replaced all the covers, and I replaced them with the new covers, which are much more fantasy. I don't know if you can see that, which it gives more of the tonal feel of the thing with the backgrounds and the whole colors, and it's darker as well. And I mean, it's still one of those series again that sort of sits between boxes, but I think the covers represent it much better. And I definitely noticed a big difference once I swapped the covers in terms of the sales and the whole sort of response to the series, that it was finally finding its audience a bit more. So yeah,
I'm looking at them. Hey, Sarah, can we put these in the show notes?
Yeah, is that all right?
Before and after, is that okay with you, Cindy?
Yeah.
Because I think that it would be good for the reader. First of all, you're right. Those first covers are adorable, but I get what you're saying. The second ones, and I love your titles. They're hilarious. And so, I mean, they're just perfect, but there's a huge difference between the two sets of covers. But I think it'd be good for the listeners to be able to see it.
But they're both, you can tell that they're both like a paranormal.
Yes, absolutely.
Series.
Yeah.
But I think that the second set you did, it kind of, it shows more of the tone of the book, but then it also is more similar to your other covers in your other series as well. So it's kind of like...
Yeah, that was the other reason I sent the other graphic, to show that it also fits in better, I think, with my stable.
Absolutely. Yeah. The cats seem to be your theme. You got a cat thing going on, which I love.
Yeah. Well, that was one marketing thing I figured out very quickly. That if you put a cat on the cover, the book will sell twice as much.
Yeah, there you go. Do what you got to do.
That is true.
I actually do, like, the cats do play a very major role in all this stuff. So it isn't just put on the cover, to get the sales. Like, they are key characters as well. So, because a lot of my readers are like mad cat lovers.
Yes. So what's the biggest mindset change you think you've had over your career?
I actually think it was linked to I think one of your other questions originally was about the whole success thing, and I think that's been my biggest problem actually in terms of hurdle, that I the biggest thing for me is, and I only come to this, I think, the last 6 months, and I'm still working at it, is learning to define success myself, because that's been my biggest problem. Like I at school, I was Hermione, really. I just, I always had to top the class, and I went to the kind of school that was very, very competitive, in the sense that they used to actually publish rankings and put it up. Like you would do
oh
exams.
my gosh, wow.
And they would calculate your scores, and then they would put it up on the wall, and then parents would come and copy down each, your rankings versus other. It was very, very competitive, and so you were constantly measured in that way. And I think when I started indie, it was like a replica almost of what happened at school. That and there's a whole indie thing, obviously, of the stages, like you're a 4-figure author, then you're a 5-figure author, then you're a 6-figure author, and then it was like 7 figures, like the ultimate thing. And if you're and definitely there, for a while anyway, I think there was a thing in the groups very much that if you're not a 7-figure author, you're just not really successful. That was the badge of success. And and I think that really killed me, because it was like everything was just about that, and you get to sort of, and there's a vast gap between getting to 6 figures and getting to 7. You sort of think it's like, but it's actually a very big jump. And and I was on the headlong thing of I had to double my earnings every year, otherwise I'm a failure. And I was really killing myself to try and achieve this goal, this definition of success that was put there by, I guess, arbitrary, I don't know, whatever. And I was, churning, well, not churning, but I was writing like 5-6 books a year, really pushing myself to do it. And then, I'm glad in a way I did it, because I ran harder to launch myself, if you like, in the beginning. But I think by last year, even before the pandemic hit, I was really starting to suffer from burnout, and I was going from book to book, and I was struggling. I was conscious that a part of me was very unhappy and stressed, but it was almost like you were on this hamster wheel you couldn't get off. And the definition of success was that. And in every author group at the time anyway, it was like everybody was not bragging, but like people were talking about, I've got 3 books out a month, and the next one will be like, I've got 5 books out a month, and how much they were earning from that. And everywhere you were bombarded by all this. So and someone like me, it felt like you were constantly being, measuring up and coming up a failure, because you couldn't match that. And I'm not like, I'm not I guess it all depends on what you mean, but I'm not a fast writer in that sense. Like I'm not able to produce 10,000 words a day. I think the pandemic really helped, because it does make you stop and sort of take stock. And I suddenly thought to myself, what am I doing this for? Like it's crazy. I don't have debt. I don't have dependents. We don't. We haven't got children we need to put through college. We don't. Why am I doing this? Like it was all this arbitrary number in the sky, because some person on the other side of the world said that 7 figures is the mark of success, and I was working like I was, like I was on the streets, like I worked as hard as if I didn't have money for my next meal, kind of thing.
Right.
Actually, it wasn't that. I mean, not that.
No, I don't. I do know.
It was like it was crazy, and what was I doing it for? Just to feel like I succeeded because of this. Yeah. So anyway, I sort of took stock, and I sort of thought, all I wanted ages ago was to be able to earn a living from writing in a way that would match what I could have done if I'd done a proper job, to make myself feel less guilty. And I more than exceeded that already. So why am I, essentially I wanted a life where I could work from home, write books, stories for a living, and that's what I'm doing. So so I think I'm still struggling with it, but I think the real a person is really successful, when you are able to define your own success, and you're not reliant on someone else's, and that doesn't have to be writing, it could be anything. It could be like a person who feels like they need to be in a yacht club and, wear Louis Vuitton all the time or whatever. But, that whole keeping up with the Joneses thing, that you have to be able to get to the stage where you are confident enough to define your own success. And so I think for me, that's the biggest mindset shift in terms of getting me to where I am now, because otherwise I really was on that kind of killer hamster tread.
Yes.
I think that's really common right now, especially in the indie community. I mean, because I was the same way. I wanted to make a certain dollar figure. And then once, if you achieve that, then you're like, oh, well, now I need to go up to this next, I need to continue to increase. I think there's something about like like having that work ethic where you're like, okay, I've done this. Now I need to move on to the next level. And we can step back, like for me, I've had to do the same thing. I'm like, okay, do I want to do that? Do I want to live the life that I would need to live to make that next level?
Yeah.
Or am I fine now? Or can I even?
And you need that, like, when you don't actually need your dated, like, to be honest, I mean, we don't have any lives anyway.
Yeah.
And I like it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was almost like you were doing it just for this arbitrary idea of success. When you're and I found that I was wishing my life away. Like I kept thinking, if I could just do this book by this, and then by November I could do this book. By next February I could do that. And then one day I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be like, I'll be 50 by the time I finish these 3 series and this, and these 3 years will be gone. And what if I've done with that time? What about my poor husband? Like, it was just.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And I've definitely had the same kind of revelation over this last year, as a year and a half, too, with the pandemic and everything. So, there are just things that are, there's money that needs to be made because it's my job, but I've sort of had to back off this whole striving for more thing, because there are things in my life that require my time and my attention, and I'm not willing to give those up to make more or do more. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Well, see, I was someone who did give those things up because
I did too, but I'm not doing it anymore. Yeah.
I now, having done it, I suddenly realized that, it's not, you can't, like, you need more. And actually recently, I read something, or I kept hearing this phrase, and I thought, that's so true. I never thought about that, which is the whole thing about your job won't love you back.
Yes, exactly. That's so true. Yeah. That is so true.
Of all the things, it's true. That's like, yes, it's great. I love my job. I love writing, and I feel very grateful that I'm doing what I do. And I'm very grateful to my readers and stuff. But at the end of the day, there's got to be more to you than just being, an indie writer churning out books for like, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's great. I love that answer.
Very good. Yeah. Very good answer. So, well, we're getting close to running out of time, but we did want to touch on a couple more things real quick. And one of them is your newsletters. And your newsletters are a bit different, and they're very chatty, and they have, lots of images and stuff. And that kind of goes against the grain of what you're told to do, with your newsletter. So could you tell us a little bit about like your content you put in, and how you connect with your readers through your newsletter?
Well, I think the most important thing in a newsletter is to be authentic, and, to be your genuine self. And so I don't think you should force yourself to be chatty if that's not your style, because, it'll come across unnatural as well. But, if it is you, then I don't think it hurts to embrace that. I did worry about it for a long time because, it's not as you say, it's not the usual way. You're told you should just send a short, succinct message. Here's my new release. These are the buy links. Here's the book cover. Bam, 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 buy. Okay. I actually tried very hard in the beginning to follow that convention, but I found it really difficult to hit send on those newsletters because it was just so not me. And the way I communicate, I don't know, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I'm one of those people who, even on an email, I still feel the need to write a greeting, and then maybe a line or two of just general polite chit chat before diving straight into the business. So, for example, if I'm writing to Jami, I'd be like, "Hi, Jami. How's the new grandchild doing? Sure, you're all very excited about a new member of the family. Something like that." To me, it feels very abrupt and almost like quite blunt and maybe even a bit rude, just to get to the point, especially if I'm asking people to buy my book. And so it just sort of naturally evolved when I was sending out these newsletters that I would always include a few lines of chat before mentioning the new release, and then, and finish with a bit of chat at the end, usually some funny story about something that happened to me recently. Yeah. And the other thing is, I guess I see newsletters differently. They're not, to me, not a cold sales tool. I think if all readers want is an alert about your new book, then the big retailers are 10 times better than us doing that job. And they're actually more trustworthy in a way, in terms of, readers preferring to give their emails. So for a reader to give you their email, I think it's got to be more than just that you're giving them buy links. But I don't know. I feel like nowadays we're we're sort of bombarded with requests, to join newsletters everywhere. And, I don't know about you, but I just want less things in my inbox. And I never give my email, actually, unless there's some very specific benefit. Like I'm planning to buy something from that site now, and the newsletter will give me a 10% discount. Or the other time I join is when I'm genuinely interested in something and I can see added value in terms of information. That's how I see a new author newsletter. It's really, to me, more fan club type thing, where it's like when you're genuinely interested in a TV show or a celebrity or a movie. When someone is a fan of something, they're interested in everything about that particular topic. I feel like if readers are your fan, then they're really into all that sort of the DVD extras, if you like. And also it's that personal kind of emotional connection that they get, which they can't get from the retailers, and I think in a way that's why people, do follow celebrities on Instagram or whatever. It's the feeling that they're seeing behind the curtain and they're being invited into the world of that person. It's not random. I still try to make sure that the content that I chat about is related to my books. So often it's about the inspiration behind the events in the stories. So I think readers love hearing about that. And, for example, my recent release, which was in my English Cottage Garden series, one of the characters has a pet slug. And, it's a bit of a comic thing. But the reason it's in there is because I once had a pet slug. So I was living in an apartment. This was many, many years ago, and I couldn't have a pet. And I was desperate for a pet. And I found this slug in a head of cabbage that I bought at the supermarket. And I decided to keep him in a takeaway container. And I used to feed him, bits of lettuce and things. And years later, he was the inspiration for this character. I had a picture of him, actually. And so I thought it doesn't have to be a big, long thing, but it's just a little thing saying, a recent book, it was inspired by a real life story, and you tell the little story. And it's another way for you to re-mention a book, a new release or something, without it sounding like buy my book again. If you don't have specific events or incidents that inspired something, then it could just be something that's taken from now, So like, for example, with the same series, again, I talk a lot about the fact that I'm trying to create an English cottage garden myself in Australia and the challenges I'm meeting with that. And I figured that anybody who is reading that series, because it's about gardening and mysteries, is probably going to be a keen gardener or is interested in gardening, at least in some way or form. And so, if I talk about my attempts at gardening, and I'm very honest, I don't, it isn't just like Instagram perfect filter photos, I talk about all my failures and funny things too, then it's something that they would be interested in. Sometimes they just people love before and after photos, I've noticed, or they love just getting a glimpse into, sort of that behind the curtain idea. So even a picture of your desk, a writer's desk where the magic happens. I did test it because I was worried about turning people off with the long newsletter with all these sort of pictures and stories. I found that there weren't any more unsubscribes after a long newsletter than, the old days when I used to try and do a very succinct one. And also my open rates have remained very high. And on the other side is I get a lot of engagement from them. Like, I get a huge amount of emails back from readers, actually. They tell me about their families, their recent house move, their grandchildren, they're baking their own cats. They send me pictures of their cats, their gardens. And I have some lovely messages from readers saying that they actually love receiving my newsletters as much as my books, because to them, it's like an event in itself when they get a newsletter from me. And they find it very refreshing because the newsletters are different and they love seeing the photos. And a lot of them saying how lovely and refreshing it was to get a really honest account. So I think, if that's your style, then, you should embrace it and not worry too much about offending or annoying readers, because it's, in a way, it's a bit like pricing or all these other things. You'll attract a certain type of reader. And, if they're really offended or whatever, they want to unsubscribe, they can always get alerts from Amazon or other platforms. Nobody ever missed a book they really want. And I think your voice and your style in a newsletter is part of your brand. And it's part of that emotional experience that readers get from you, like an extension of your books. So, it doesn't mean you have to be chatty. Like, if that's not your thing, you shouldn't force it. But it needs to be something, I think, something that marks your newsletter as different. And it's not just another email with, here's the new book and here's a buy link. Whether it's like maybe you're really good at recommending books in your genre, or maybe you provide, a lot of interesting background info about the world of your stories. For example, like maybe, I don't know, if your books are set around the world of sailing and, you talk in detail about that, or maybe your books are set in a particular destination and then you give a bit more like a travel log or more interesting info about that. Whatever it is, I think you should just embrace that as part of your brand. I agonized over this for a long time, and I kept worrying. You always worry because it's so hard to get people on your list that you worry that you're losing subscribers. But in the end, I just decided actually, it's like that quote that people say about that, if you try to please everybody, you end up sort of bland and unmemorable. And you're better actually taking a stance and having some people love you, even if it turns others off, a bit like your books as well. You'll be more successful if you're something special to some rather than nothing special to everyone.
But this has been great, Hsin-Yi. Thank you so much for coming on and for talking to us and for sharing all your insights. So where can people find out more about you?
Yes.
Probably the best place is my website, which is www.hyhanna.com. Okay. I am on Facebook, but I'm very bad on social media, actually. So I'm a bit like Hallie's comment on Facebook. I pass by once every so many years. So when I'm on there, I am very interactive, but the social media doesn't come naturally to me. I don't know if I'm just too old, like the whole thing passed me by, but so I don't think of going on it very much. And so, the best place to find me probably, and obviously on Amazon, you can find all my books on my Amazon author page. Right.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we have really enjoyed having you. This has just been so great. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this. And we're just happy you made time to talk with us, and you're on the other side of the world, so it's right time where you're at, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been really, really nice to chat.
All right. We will have all the links in the show notes, and those can be found at wishidknownthenpodcast.com. And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.